Round 2 can finally happen between Virgilius the Red Gaze and Maestro Jumsoon of the Ring. Well, the distorted version to be more precise. Previously on Leviathan. Virgilius, the Red Gaze, had a conversation in his head, and not just with his own mind, but also with Carmen, the voice of the distortion phenomenon. He didn't know her name, of course, but he was able to figure out that she was the one causing the distortion to happen. Much as she tried to do with him. Using her charisma and knowledge of his past to make the attempt, knowing which buttons to push, trying to get him to focus on himself and not anyone or anything else, even hitting him where it really hurt by referring to the orphanage that was destroyed and the children that lived there as not worth thinking about, while also hinting, but not by name, that Ian was still around. While Virgilius understood and even agreed with what was being said, he did not agree with what was essentially saying, give up on what gives your life meaning. She also went over how the distortion apparently worked. And she went over the process on both sides of the conversation, rather than just hearing one side of the conversation. But in the end, Virgilius was just trying to get as much info out of her as possible. He wasn't truly taking her seriously, as he believed, well, more or less, like a certain German philosopher would put it, that life without pain has no meaning, and walks a path that he walked before, one of his own choosing. A world that wasn't a psychological equivalent of the torment of Tantalus. This resulted in a laurel crown of thorns, along with a right shoulder pauldron of a Roman-style soldier and a red cape draped around the right shoulder manifesting. He did not distort. He manifested what Moses, the distortion detective, would call psychoments, and Angela and those within there would call E.G.O. We continue this story with Virgilius, the Red Gaze, noting the cloak of blood that he was now wearing. It was soggy and began to sink. He knew the way he needed to go. He just had to walk there, bleeding, and sometimes drinking. And no, not in the sense that he's a blood fiend. As far as I'm aware, he's not. He won't stop with his pace. He had to cut what was in front of him first. The blood that he must truly shed. It was cutting at his own cowardly neck. Well, according to him, anyway. It turns out that Carmen wasn't quite done with him yet, as he told Ver that she might know how to get him closer to his dream. Unfortunately for her, Virgilius was a rationalist. At least with this. He saw no reason for him to believe everything that she said. But her own existence wasn't a lie. He felt this. Where, if there was such a thing as a soul, then the soul that Carmen pointed to, or rather her voice pointed to her, if it was right, then there's such a thing that she spoke of. That time he was waiting for had finally arrived. Oh, so she's found her next pawn to manipulate. I'd be careful, Virgilius. Her last pawn... it ended badly for him. He ended up getting Durandal stabbed inside him, thanks to a selfish where fate existed and everything was set to follow it. This moment would be where he would follow, waiting for his existence, waiting for that moment to come. He felt a kind of bliss from this. That magic might exist in that world. I believe it was Arthur C. Clarke that said, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." Well, regarding the source, which is not taking a train from King's Cross Station in London, well, it certainly increased the prospect of making his wish a reality. It embraced his heart that he believed never existed before. Destiny, at least as far as he was concerned, gave him the finger and told him to go himself. He killed any aspects of him that would get in the way. His heart was buried. The blood on his hands would appear to unravel this narrative that he crafted. That place had what he wanted. The misfortune, cornerstones leading him to that point in time. Then he remembered the shonen anime antagonist was there with him. The distorted Maestro Jumsoon, where he spoke that it wouldn't be possible in his point of view. He'd never been like that. Virgilius noted that he saw a lot of worlds, but it's nothing more than filling the canvas, no matter how wide it might be. Infinity can't be contained on paper, as there's an end of it. Well, can't really argue with that. Maestro Jumsoon mentioned that he killed the mallet artist over and over again. He was sure to kill, and then wake up. Virgilius considered this a repetition, that there was no such thing as absolutes. He can move forward, understanding this. He then hopes that nothing will ever happen. A cruel hope. A possibility of the expectation of what if. But this time, it might not be in vain. Jumsoon was silent at the colour fixer's words. Then he had a question. He remembered that Carmen wondered what world he wanted to create. That she was the architect of the distortion phenomenon. That Jumsoon was whispered to sweetly about the way he looked at himself. He would say that he would lend his strength with gentleness and sincerity. He forgot insanity. Virgilius then asked what the ring maestro, the scaly ring maestro, wanted. Who replied by saying that he wanted to fill the world with dots, as in, watch the world burn in a different way. Virgilius said, in response to this, right. Clearly not impressed. Then Maestro Jumsoon asked what kind of world he was trying to reach, eager to hear what Virgilius had to say regarding that. He considered it hard to put into words. It's a world that can only be known if you feel it with your body. This resulted in bizarre laughter, along with dark blue fist constructs coming from his eyes, which hit the red gaze hard. And where it hit, coloured dots appeared, sinking in despair each time, the despair of every possibility that he could have gone through. He made his mind up, and the despair that unfolded was reflected in the form of a terrified hope. One that can be cut without hesitation. He saw what blocked him each time the dots struck him. He thought of Garnet, Lapis, Rikoko, Van Yen, Denver, Nunseul, the children of the orphanage, and other faces that he'll no longer meet. Well, Denver and Lan Yen are unaccounted for. The turncoat Nunseul is probably hiding, knowing that he's dead if Virgilius finds out what he did, as everything he cut bled. The lab he was there, turned red with puddles of blood. He woke up with all that redness. He was still standing. Maestro Jumsoon asked him with surprise how he could stand upright after being exposed to those dots. Not being able to comprehend this in his numerous pupils. From a distance, his dots filled a picture, but up close it's full of imperfect voids. The continuous mind can't be filled with dots. They might rub against, but they can't stain the red gaze. He then gathered all of his strength and hit the floor, making indigo paint wet the floor in a burst. Virgilius noted that the dots were drawn at regular intervals, approaching at a fierce speed. But the fast-paced dots never connected. They weren't even a line, the space between the dots being an unselected area, an empty universe, alienated spaces instead of the blood that will flow, where the point and a dot touch, it becomes a line. When the stem flowing through the line creates a plane, the space filled, and then what was drawn was up to the artist. He made a long line like a spear by winding the blood like a flag, as if it was natural. A red window made by weaving dots one after another. Throwing this line at Maestro Jumsoon's chest. Infinitely different. Oh, sorry, no. Infinitely indifferent to what was happening. Maestro Jumsoon swung his fist and spread numerous dots, but there was too much space for the connection of weak points to leak. It's like using a shotgun at long range. It's unlikely to cause that much damage, if at all. The line that he created became a single... Yes, it became a single red dot, and plain from the front, passing through the veil of indigo dots, piercing through the right arm and shoulder of the mad artist Distortion. So his Psychoment results in blood-related constructs that would make Scarlet from Mortal Kombat look unimaginative. Now, Maestro Jumsoon would probably be thinking, not again. When there was only one point it was complete. And all Maestro Jumsoon could say was, "Whoops." Virgilius asked him if the moment the dots were lined up, did the beauty of the dots he fell in love with disappear? Seeing humans as having no choice but to walk along the line and live in the fabric, moving forward, the point only passing by for a moment, the different points of despair approaching him, piling up one after another over the years. The dots became lines and created a path of possibility. Maestro Jumsoon was obsessed with the moment, fascinated by the stimulus that moment created, which only gave ecstasy and penetrated without limits. And the despair that would plunge him down without knowing the bottom. Something Virgilius wouldn't be able to get out of. He now knew the contradiction of dots, falling down an endless abyss like branches descending on a tree, where the roots of which had been dug up. According to Carmen, distortion was the form of being reborn into a new form by fully accepting one's desires, the value you consider yourself to be the answer, where it became the reason for your existence, and that form that you've been looking for would become your own form. Desire itself that covered the roots, collapsing. What happens to the things that make it up? During this, Maestro Jumsoon was silent and stopped all of his actions. Then Virgilius continued his thoughts. That Maestro Jumsoon wouldn't go back into the egg, as the world wouldn't give such a kind and convenient opportunity to do so. Not more than once, anyway. Just like people in the city. Just because they look friendly on the outside, they can be infinitely cold inside. Jumsoon continued to look at him, expressionless, gazing at him. Then, blue liquid began to burst out of his body. But it wasn't due to an action of the mad artist, or Virgilius himself. It was due to a saw blade that cut him in half. It wasn't a cocoon or an egg. It was something diverse in character. It didn't seem to have any contact with the personal life of the point. It cut violently through him, and stretched out and drew out a size that was so large that it was impossible to even fit in all of his body, causing it to be seemingly born. What tore through Maestro Jumsoon looked like an iron safe, which had drills on its legs, with an eye in the lock. Oh! It's that abnormality. It's Shadenfreude. Yes, I know, butchered the pronunciation. Otherwise known as shameful joy, taking pleasure from others' misfortunes. This heat-level abnormality is safe as long as you don't look at it. If you do, it will move towards you and use its saw blades to brutally murder you. So the opposite of the Weeping Angels. Well, except the saw blade parts. Virgilius made the mistake of looking at it too long, and it spun its saw blades violently at him with force. Maestro Jumsoon previously received that saw blade, Virgilius asking if it was correct to say that he accepted what was happening to him. It felt so heavy that it was difficult to conclude with an expression. The saw blade rotated. Blood began to splatter in all directions from the blood-wrapped red sword E.G.O weapon that he formed. But the blood construct wouldn't last. This wasn't a problem, as he could make a new one, but he needed to bleed in order to do that. He wrapped his body in his red cloak, and became one huge drop of blood. The saw blade ground at him, making the blood gush out and soak the floor. It gathered like a puddle. He became one with the puddle. Let's see. So far, his Psychoment grants him limited shapeshifting, hemokinesis, and added resistance to psychological attacks. This measure was all to hide by some time. It seemed like it could reappear, and he could be safe as long as the blood didn't dry up completely. But before the blood hardened, he needed to think about the situation, judge it. The eyes were looking at him, but not staring. There was a strong lust, looking for and lusting after him. Then he heard someone shout about profit. The abnormality switched targets and tore apart the distortions, eliminating the possibility of even saving them. Trust me, Virgilius, it's better to die than live like that. During this, Gubo, the N-Corp employee sent there, Azea, the researcher that he was there to collect, and Nunsiul, the turncoats, were observing from behind the broken windows in the lab. Gubo was satisfied with the observations. Azea opened the back door of the lab. A hallway could be seen through there. Yeah, Azea could have escaped at any time, much as Virgilius could. But there were several reasons why he didn't. He likely wanted to milk the ring for everything they had. Or rather, what he could get out of them. Among other reasons. Gubo and Azea entered the hallway and left Nunsiul for dead. He was screaming at this betrayal. Well, what comes around goes around, as Shadenfreude was charging at him. Nunsiul knew what this meant as the saw blade was approaching. All he was armed with was a thin tool made for extracting moonstone. The same tool that he used to literally stab Rikoko in the back. Not suitable for fighting a murderous mechanical monstrosity. He knew he was well and truly boned as it came closer to him. Virgilius emerged from the puddle of blood, swinging his blood-soaked sword, scattering drops of blood towards it. The sprinkling soon hardened into sharp blades, cutting and piercing it. It was soaked in blood, but it wasn't beige, like a 1970s kitchen. The sword of blood stuck to it without penetrating it. It made Nunsiul a lesser target, for now at least. Virgilius asked him why, as in why he betrayed them to the ring. Apparently he wanted some representation, recognition, prestige, something like that. Virgilius then asked him again why. Nunsiul knew that he wasn't going to get out of this without something happening to him. So he told Virgilius that he can survive because he's different, no matter how weak others were. They wouldn't pursue them in order to avenge themselves in an unprofitable way. Virgilius let him continue. It was apparently because he lacked the confidence to live his whole life being chased by the ring. Was he the only one? The same goes for the others that he didn't kill within that fixer office. Virgilius asked if he could survive for him. Nuncial again questioned this decision. It made him give a tired smile. He was confident that his family would be safe, so even if he was killed by Virgilius, he knew that the ring wouldn't touch his family. The ring wouldn't care about them. Then he hinted that the middle would care about the family members of those that betrayed them and would unlikely to be giving them a quick and painless death. Let's just say that. Yeah, he's relieved that they didn't get on the middle's bad side. Yes. Tanya was a higher up in that finger. In fact, I'm surprised that the Black Silence got away with it. Well, he got off lightly by being demoted, which is actually worse than death for a fixer's career. Virgilius, close his eyes! Those words were heavy. He was confused and lost himself. He relied on the orphanage, but he couldn't protect them. He couldn't even avenge the children properly. He saw himself as insecure and precarious, specifically believing that children would see him as that. How much and to what extent did he seem to be able to protect someone? Nuncial's choice was something that Virgilius pushed him towards because he couldn't do anything properly. Neither was able to understand the other. There will always be differences in that world. They will not know each other, even if they think that they do. Nuncial then said that if he died, he wanted Virgilius to die as well, but also, it must have been a selfish desire that didn't fit into wanting to die as he wanted. He then closed his eyes himself, but not soon enough as the abnormality ground his body. As if he was to become the latest dish of spaghetti bolognese in a District 23 restaurant. Oh, why do I keep doing that? Referring to that place? Well, you get the idea. Anyway, let's move on. It happened so quickly. There was barely enough time to register this. Virgilius then hid in the puddle of blood again. All feelings of mourning and sadness were left behind. He kept moving forward. Not much could be gathered from the brief encounter, but he instinctively knew that it was a new existence that was completely different from the trajectory of life, which was called Jumsoon. It was something like distorting, and yet something else. He didn't have much time to relax and figure this out. The air was dry and cold. The blood hardened quickly. He needed to get out before he was trapped on the floor. Every time he moved from place to place in the blood, its gaze followed him persistently, knowing that he was there. It's eyes followed him steadily. There was not much blood left for him to lose, or even use. And when all of the blood ran out, he would no longer be able to use his ability, then he would cough up blood and die. He needed to replenish his blood to use them again. He needed to finish his judgment of the situation before the blood dried. A being seemingly born from distortion, its nature not completely changed. A being engrossed by desire, heading in the direction of it. A subordinate of it. That much hasn't changed. He saw it as a variation of distortion. Well, he's not off by much. As this one wasn't created through artificial means. That's what an abnormality usually is. As for distortions, they're made from humans. And we know who's encouraging this, if not the architect of it. He didn't have all the info on that. He needed to gather all the information that he could and move forward based on that. When he was in the puddle, it made eye contact with him. Then the moment he closed his eyes, it turned its back on him and killed Nanxiu. Ah, that's what he was looking for. It's the gaze. Yes, he figured it out. You're perfectly safe as long as you don't look at it too long. Now, what will happen next? Well, we're going to have to wait until the next book to find out. Meanwhile, let's go over my final thoughts on what has been revealed in this one. Now, this shows that not all of the abnormalities that was in the facility were contained within it. When it became the library after the White Nights and Dark Days that Ayin instigated. Or rather finished what Carmen started. Either that or they escaped during the White Nights that Angela instigated. Either way, they might be causing trouble for the city. As if it needs any other nuisances or dangers. It also shows that the sword that Virgilius was wielding here was a construct made of blood. Something that the cloak and possibly the laurel made possible. It can be destroyed, but he can make another. It also appears to be more confirmation that the Red Gaze has his own plans. Gubo and Azir will likely turn up later. That is, if he's not intercepted by Virgilius or Denver first. Yeah, Denver is unaccounted for. Nanxiu, let us just say that his bad karma caught up with him. At least they won't have to worry about being pursued by the ring, as Virgilius and those under his employ didn't kill the ring maestro. Shadenfreude did. I mean, how were they supposed to know that the last thing that you could do with that abnormality was to look in its general direction? It's the burrowing heaven that's the opposite. And we know where that is, don't we? Last time we checked. Yeah, in the library. Are other abnormalities from what used to be the facility out there? I can think of some worse ones than Shadenfreude. Aleph types. I can think of two that are unaccounted for at this point. Melting love. Yes, that can infect others and turn them into minions. And Army in Black, which can cause explosions. the former being the most dangerous of the two. Well, if they do appear, they're unlikely to appear in that lab. In fact, it was dangerous enough to contain them within the facility, and they knew what was going on there. Yeah, the wings, they keep their secrets close. Not only from other wings, but any that might seek to profit from that knowledge kept within. Will we find out what happened to E.G.O and Asia? What about Denver and also Garnet in that cocoon? Let's hope we don't have to wait too long to find out. Until next time, hail the rabbit!